I'm seeing a lot of questions come in here through about purification strategies. So it might be in the best interest to move ahead to the meat of our discussion on purification techniques and strategies. Heather, would you mind pulling up the response of these polls? So we wanted to know which techniques folks have found most effective, and I'm seeing affinity chromatography seems to be the most, followed by multimodal and ion exchange. How's that resonate with you guys? How's that land?
You know, with multispecifics, even if affinity resins are available, I tend to try to stay. I try not to rely on affinity chromatography, particularly for the multispecifics, and the reason is most of the multispecifics, they're product-related contaminants bind to the affinity resins just as good as the actual product, and increasingly, I hate to use cliches, but with process intensification, you're really trying to limit the number of unit operations you've got. So I like using, the example of chromatography. I like using, every step should help you with the process-related contaminants. So, maybe in some ways, old school approaches are more powerful.
Jian, do you agree?
So this result resonated really well with me because, to Mark's point, we really want to utilize every step in the process to do purification, right? And I do find the affinity chromatography, maybe not necessarily protein A or protein G, but I think there are some newer resins can work really well with bispecific or multispecific molecule, especially I think this in conjunction with some upstream development effort. For example, the case I want to bring up was that there's the bispecific molecule that it has we can optimize the expression ratio during the cell line development stage. So we can try to overexpress, one arm, and then we can form more of those bispecific, more of that homodimer, which does not bind or does not possess a certain variable domain or region. For example, we do utilize the CH1XL resin from Thermo Fisher, and I think another option could be the Map Select VH3. I think that's relatively new to the market as well. So utilizing those affinity chromatography can already start to remove a lot of the homodimer from the capture step. And then going to the purification, the fine polishing step, you will have less product-related impurity. So that's why I find the results resonate very well with me, because we also take that approach. It's probably a more holistic approach from cell line development and cell culture development, going all the way down to purification, so you can achieve some impurity removal during the capture stage, which can be very different from your traditional map purification, right?
Yeah, that looks like it answers, or at least touches on the answer for a question we had come in from you, which was asking about the most effective. I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong one here. Somebody asked about homodimers. Oh, it was Yoon again, yeah. But yeah, Mark, anything to add?
No, I think I think it sounds to me like Jen leans a little bit more on affinity, or would prefer to, than I do. But I think we both take very similar approaches. And as she pointed out, in some cases, an affinity resin actually may not recognize a critical product-related contaminant. Just a lot of our projects, it just tends not to be the case, right? A lot of times the portion of the molecule that binds the affinity resin exists in the contaminants we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's very important when you apply affinity as your major product-related impurity removal step, it has to be in conjunction with upstream or cell line cell culture modifications, to achieve that purification.
Yeah, they can overexpress the thing that you can easily get rid of.
Yeah, yes,
right.
Exactly.
Do you guys have any examples there?
I think Jen's example was excellent.
Yeah.
I don't have any. Like I said, maybe reflecting my bias towards, an old school approach. And by the way, when I say old school, I don't mean, old resins. Some of the newer resins, I don't know, newer in this industry isn't all that new, but some of the newer resins are really much better than the resins we were working with, say, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And continuing along with purification strategies and techniques, I saw an earlier question come in from an audience member, Thomas, who asked, what are the main differences between bispecific purification and trispecific, specifically during protein A /CEX process development?
Yeah, I would say, well, probably, I don't think there's a big difference, right? Once you get to these constructs that are not very natural in their design, I think all of the problems we encounter with a bispecific, we're encountering with a trispecific. From my experience, usually the more complicated the construct, the bigger the problems you tend to have with things like solubility and aggregation. And depending on how the construct is designed, also, straight up product related contaminants, a piece of it missing or a piece of it duplicated.
I would agree. I think that I mainly work on bispecific, but within AbbVie, we also have several trispecific assets. And from my knowledge, they are probably having more stability issues because of the overall heterogeneity of the molecule. And just like Mark said, the more you add on, like unusual to a molecule construct, the more issue you may have. So probably compared to the bispecific, you just have more challenges during the development with issues such as stability issues.
Yeah, and by the way, I think the engineers are getting better from year to year. The people designing these molecules are, every year they're getting a little bit better understanding solubility, understanding, the intermolecular, how the molecule might undesirably react with, itself. And as they get better, it gets easier for downstream people, to deal with it. And a lot of the multispecifics that are, say more than, 2 specific regions, with the antibody-like constructs, a lot of it's just something at the C terminus that's acting like a complement binding region. So you're not necessarily getting all these bad combinations, right? If it's tied to the same chain, you still have a relatively small number of inadvertent, products. Yeah. And of course, that can change depending on the construct.
Yeah, thank you. Jian, you mentioned stability before in regards to trispecifics, and I'm seeing here a question from Richard. Can you talk about sialic acid content associated with bispecific antibody function, potency, and stability? Does that play into at all what you were alluding to?
I think that would be out of my expertise. I wonder if Mark has any insights on that question.
Not a lot, and we don't have an analytic person here, and we don't have a carbohydrate person here. So I think we're not going to be very good at dealing with that question.
Fair enough. Apologies. Anyway, continuing on purification strategy, if you could give one piece of advice to teams that are developing their purification strategy for their multispecifics, what would that be? Maybe multiple pieces of advice. match the theme.
Analytics. Front load the analytics.
Analytics.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean
I
it's you know, like I like Jen's term, the eyes.
find
you
it very funny because we talk about the purification strategies, and it turned out that we're thinking about analytics being the the most critical element.
Well, I mean, so we work with a lot of different companies, and some a lot of times we have somebody who comes to us with a purification challenge, and 2 weeks into the project we're working on analytics, and a lot of times the client says, well, yeah, but you're here to help us with the purification, and we're like, that's right, and we can't tell where we're going, we need to see. And so yeah, I think you just can't overestimate the importance of being able to see what you're doing.
Yeah. Spot on. Again, it goes back to Jian's comment, they are the eyes, right? They're the eyes of our development.
I know it's kind of boring that we keep coming back to the same thing, but it's really important.
It is true.
Yeah, no, I believe it. And I've heard that as well. You can never underestimate the importance of analytics, or overestimate, I should say.